This is the Pure Presence book study, and we're studying the spiritual discourses of Shri Atmananda. You're probably expecting to see Bill here today with Joel Dresner, but Bill's away and Joel can't make it, so I'm here instead with another Jenny, my friend Jenny Sheehan. And I hope some of you will also come on screen and discuss this material with us. If you have a comment or a question on any of this and would like to do that, then just use the raised hand feature, and you'll find it at the bottom of the screen under reactions. It's difficult to monitor the chat all the time, so that's really going to be the best way. And then we'll bring you on and we'll have a talk. So today we are looking at Discourses 51 to 60. Jenny, would you like to start, or would you like me to start?
I'm happy to start with.
Jolly good. Take it away then.
Number 51 is, what is the object of knowledge? Nothing. Because when the so-called object comes into the plane of knowledge, it loses its objectivity and becomes knowledge itself, or one with the knower. And Jenny, what is the object of knowledge? There seems to be a little bit of a differentiation that needs to be made with mind consciousness, which he mentioned earlier in the book. And then the knowledge, the aspect of consciousness, knowledge, we could say with a capital K.
Yes, I think. I think the problem comes with everyday language. As in everyday language, we use the word knowing to refer to a fact, a subtle object, or a physical object. We say, I know a person, I know Bill or Fred or whoever. Or we can say, I know a building, I know the Eiffel Tower, so on. So then we have a knower and a known at that point, and that's duality. But I think Atmananda is using the word knowing and knowledge in much more in the sense of understanding the essential nature of, or the reality of. I think that's what he really means by that. And then he goes on to explain that just as when we see something, we superimpose form onto it. So when we say we know something, we superimpose thingness onto it. And in both cases, it's a superimposition by the mind. The reality is prior to the superimposition. And he does distinguish mind from consciousness, which is what all the Advaita Vedanta teachers do. It's a very important distinction, the distinction between mind and consciousness, two totally different things. Consciousness not really a thing, mind definitely a thing. You can see what happens in your mind, but it's the consciousness that is the seeing.
Yes, thank you. And the second little paragraph under here, Atmananda addresses that. Knowing is always directed to the reality. The object of knowledge is always the reality, if the reality can ever be an object. Therefore, it is only the reality that is known in every case.
Yeah, so that's its essential essence. In other words, that's the essential essence of everything.
And as you've taught us, consciousness doesn't need mind to know.
Yeah.
And actually, number 52, these two really blend in well together.
Yes, they do. Do you want to carry on with 52?
Sure. What are name and form, and how to transcend them? Being attracted by the existence aspect of the absolute everywhere, we start to examine what it is and immediately utilizes our senses to do the job. The senses project their own respective objects and superimpose their own particular form upon the existent sense, attributing the permanence of the absolute to the forms thus superimposed. Which is what you just said, Jenny, so that's great. You gave us a head up. In this way, we are deluded into the thought that the forms thus created are permanent, and we lose sight of the absolute. So just as you described, Jenny, there's the knowing of things, the way in the mind we say we know objects, and then there's the pure knowing, that aspect of consciousness that knows, independent of thought.
Yes, yes. Rosalind says, when we say mind with a capital M, we're referring to mind as consciousness. Now, that's something we don't do in this teaching. I know it's the case in other teachings, but I think particularly in Buddhism, there's some kind of equating of a universal mind with consciousness. But in this teaching, which comes from Advaita Vedanta, we don't do that. And Francis of Sales has explained why it's a really important distinction, because if you do that, if you conflate universal mind with universal consciousness, then what we know of mind is something that comes and goes. It's not something permanent, and it has a particular quality to it, and which is a human quality to it, or to some extent an animal quality to it. And if you superimpose that quality onto consciousness, then you are limiting consciousness. So that's why that's not done in this particular teaching. But I know that it is used in other teachings and is quite common.
Thank you for clarifying that for us. But to continue here, we've already had the verb deluded. In order to get beyond this delusion, the superimposition of reality to objects, we must go beyond these forms as well as the mind.
Exactly.
Then we will see the reality as one with our consciousness.
Yes.
And
that's really he goes on to talk about existence and consciousness being two aspects of the same reality. And so sometimes in the direct path you'll hear being and consciousness, or reality and consciousness being the same, because there's only one reality, or consciousness being the perceiving aspect of one reality. But it's really saying the same as he is saying here.
Yes, and a clarifying little line that I picked up one time from Adyashanti is, reality is what is.
Yes.
And
yes.
And what is, with the Sat Chit Ananda we spoke about earlier in here, the being, consciousness, bliss, all of a sudden that paragraph Jenny just described, existence and consciousness and bliss all being one reality.
Yeah.
But these fancy words and lingo, we don't I don't want to lose track of, wait, reality is what is.
Yes.
What is directly experienced now.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's it's a very good definition. That's a very good definition. And to then say consciousness is to equate that with reality. That's very, very powerful, because I sometimes hear students of non-duality say, well, the cat is conscious, I am conscious, the cat is conscious, consciousness is in the tree, consciousness is in the rock. But that's panpsychism, and it's dualistic. It's not non-dual. They think it is, but it isn't. And here he's saying that existence and consciousness are one. He's not saying that existence is prior to consciousness. He says names can be given only to objects. Objects have proved to be nothing but consciousness. Therefore, the name also vanishes completely, or all names are the names of consciousness. So someone wanted to know where we are. We're on Discourse 52.
I quickly wanted to share, how sometimes you pick up the book and it opens to a page, but discourse number 1238 in volume 3.
Mm-hmm.
I'll read it really quickly.
Yeah.
Reality and how to define it. Reality is beyond existence and non-existence. This is true even in the case of a so-called object. How? Let us take an example. We say a chair exists and a chair does not exist. The chair is present in both these opposites. Therefore, the chair is necessarily beyond the opposites. Beyond the opposites, there can be only one thing which is real, that is the real self. Therefore, an object is that reality itself.
Yes.
And there was something, the concreteness of the chair helped illuminate number 52 for me. So
yes, it's because chairs come into existence and chairs go out of existence. But existence or being, if you take the object away from existence, then you end up with being, and that doesn't come and go. That's the permanent reality.
And Rick West shared with us last week a statement from Parmenides that being is and not being is not.
Yes, from Parmenides. Yes, yeah, exactly.
Right, that existence is, and to talk about the chair exists, and to get into arguments of whether it exists or not, it's clearly there. I'm looking at one,
It's there temporarily, but what is really there is its reality. That when what you are looking at is your perception of the chair. And what's the perception of the chair? Well, it's seeing. It might be feeling. It could be touching. Also, basically, it's going to be seeing. And then what's the reality of that seeing? Well, it's consciousness is the ultimate perceiver. So consciousness is the ultimate seer. So you end up back at consciousness, don't you? Yeah.
Yes. Right. The true non-duality.
Yeah. Do you want to go on to 53? Should we go on to
sure
to that one?
number 53 is, what is the right approach to the solution of any spiritual question? The answer can never be found in the same plane as the question itself. When you look from the next higher plane, the question as such disappears altogether. This is because the mind is incapable of explaining itself in its own plane. So in order to explain it, you must rise to the background, the plane of consciousness. Looking from there, you see the mind with all its doubts and difficulties transformed into consciousness, and nothing ever remains over which needs to be explained. And in a way, this is describing Beal's pause practice. You know, he suggests to put your hand on your heart and pause. And that is the momentary, apparently, seemingly letting the mind discontinue its chatter and just rest in being, that somehow, even in the moments of that, solutions land.
Yes, our answers might land, but it's also really pointing to the teaching method that's used by all direct path teachers. And that is to lead the questioner from the objective aspects of the question to the subject, our self, consciousness, by the quickest route possible in the particular circumstances. And he says there might be some intermediate steps on the way. He goes into what those might be. But really, you know, when that works, then there is understanding. And in that understanding, the question automatically collapses. And I think that's what he's saying here. So the question automatically collapses if the answer comes to you in that space between thoughts. And equally, if the answer that you're given by a teacher resonates, then equally the question collapses. And that's the aim. So you hear a really good teacher will always detect when you're not completely satisfied, when there isn't complete understanding, and he'll ask you to say why you're not satisfied.
Right, almost push until there's silence, getting beyond the mind or that which is prior to thought, is the deep understanding that is craved by consciousness, you know.
Yes, understanding always comes from silence.
But to just to continue a little bit further, if it's okay, it kind of points back to our first two discourses down in the third paragraph. So senses can be well utilized for a preliminary examination of the variety in objects. Similarly, knowledge, and my understanding is kind of mind factual knowledge he's referring to here, can be utilized to examine the various perceptions, thoughts, and feelings. Because it's not about eradicating the mind, right? It's actually about mind in service of consciousness. That's what we're wanting, or something wants it.
I mean, we can't eliminate the mind. The mind is perfectly natural. It does a very good job. It's there. And yes, if it's harnessed in, as you say, in service of consciousness, then that's great. And so that's really what I meant by the teacher using, may have to use some arguments first, may not be able to take the person directly to the answer, maybe use some preliminary arguments first, and then lead them to the answer. sometimes Francis will say something to ponder, and that's when he realizes that the person isn't ready to really go to that place of understanding, but he thinks that maybe if they listen to the recording, perhaps they will later.
I love that. And the last little paragraph of number 53 speaks about the Jayanan's apparent talking is no talking. His apparent silence is no silence from his own permanent stand. He is always at the changeless, beyond all sense of relativity. And you were describing this whole discourse is really speaking of a method of self-inquiry.
Yes. And yes, and that's really the result of that self-inquiry, that there's no, you recognize that there's no separate self, no separate entity that does anything, that talks or that remains silent. Whatever happens, just happens. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Shall we look at number 54?
Yes, let's
This is a fun one, right? We have some fun ones. I could say yes that I could do these 10 discourses because some of them are just fun.
Yes, so Jivan Mukta is a term which comes from the perspective of an individual, a jiva. Jiva means an individual self that you feel yourself to be. But a Jivan Mukta means someone who is liberated from that belief to be a separate entity. So this is what he's actually asking about: is who is a Jivan Mukta?
Yes, and every man is a Jivan Mukta. In the little definition in the discourse, free within while living as a person in the world. But he only has to know it. And like you just said, Jenny, know what? Know that I am not separate from everything and everyone and pure consciousness itself.
Yes.
And to continue, the spontaneous and unaffected conduct of every man proves beyond the shadow of a doubt that he is always a Jivan Mukta. He only has to know it, and that is called realization. So something came to mind that you don't need to be a spiritual aspirant to be a Jivan Mukta. If one is living freely without constraints of conditioning or rules, things that have been superimposed upon someone's being, that they're free in the world too.
Well, anyone's free if they don't believe themselves to be a separate entity. If they do believe themselves to be a separate entity, then there is suffering that is the result of that. But if they don't, if they see that everything just happens, that what they really are is reality itself, their reality is the reality of the universe, and they're free. But the body mind is not going to be free of its conditioning. It might become free of some aspects of its conditioning, and its conditioning changes all the time. Our conditioning of our body minds change as we get older, as we go through life, changes quite a lot. Most of that is not a problem at all. It's absolutely fine. It's the conditioning that says if you're a wonderful pianist or a marvelous gardener or a flower arranger or whatever, or, all of those natural attributes are part of our conditioning. Or if you're very good at philosophy or reasoning, that's part of it too. There's nothing wrong with conditioning. Sometimes people want to get rid of conditioning. To get rid of anything this path is not about that. It's not about getting rid of anything whatsoever, other than false beliefs, which we can show to be false. He says something further down, which maybe requires a little bit of explanation. He says, yoga does not destroy the false identification with the body. It takes into account only the waking state experiences for its consideration, so its conclusions can never be complete or unassailable. Now, what he's talking about here is not the sort of hatha yoga that you might do at the leisure centre. It includes that, but he's not just talking about that. He's explaining that yoga as a spiritual path, which consists of various practices to control body or mind, is a dualistic path. And there's a bit more about that in the next, towards the end of the next discourse, in fact. But I thought it was worth explaining that now.
Absolutely. In the glossary in volume 3, yoga is defined as any process by which the mind is sought to be controlled or expanded. So a very different path than the direct path. Yes,
but it does in fact also include the body. So we are including hatha yoga in that too. So it's mind and body, yeah.
Right.
So section 55, how shall one act after realization? And I love the beginning of this. The correct answer to the question is that there's no action after realization. Therefore, the question does not arise. So it's a beautiful example of how if you're taken to the ultimate, the question disappears. So he's given an example of exactly what we were talking about. In other words, there's no separate doer, and realization includes the understanding that we don't do anything, everything just happens.
And I see Andrew just popped up on the chat, and Andrew always reminds us there is no doer, as you said, that talking or not talking.
Yes, alternatively, you can say only universal consciousness acts. And he goes on to explain that from the point of view of the body-mind, everything goes on as usual, but you'll see life differently as you'll see it from the perspective of the absolute, not from the perspective of actually being a separate entity.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I like also the first sentence of paragraph 3. He makes it really clear. By being established in the truth, you are not going to get any definite advice about your future activities. Mm-hmm. But the light from the center will so react on your mind that eventually it will run only in the proper groove. Your way of life will definitely improve and will shine on a clear and new basis, being absolutely purposeless and goalless, because you have become impersonal and your activities can be assigned to no criterion whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So Jenny, you exuded. You have something we want, if there's wanting, and it's clearly in the stabilization and establishment in the center that it's consciousness pouring through the body mind that does and acts and relates, and there's such freedom in that.
Tremendous freedom, and this is a really important discourse, this one, and what you've just read is probably the most important part of it. I mean, what some teachers refer to as a separate self, and I don't like that term. I tend to try to avoid using it. But what's called a separate self by some people is really just a state of fear and desire. And he's talking here about the desire, and both of those cause suffering. So what we're looking for is a desireless state as our kind of default setting. Whatever is happening is okay. We don't have a goal of saving the world. We just act naturally and spontaneously without feeling, I am doing this, I am changing things, I am making things better, or wanting any of those things.
Beautiful. The ending is sort of a poem of sense.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. If you stand as the body, you see only gross objects. If you stand as the mind, you see only subtle objects. If you stand as the self, you see only consciousness, which is impersonal.
Yes, yeah.
The second half of the poem, I needed some help with it. And in the glossary in volume 3, actually on page 252, it does a nice little bit about Bhatka Yogin and Jnanan, types of spiritual paths. But Jenny, do you mind to finish the
Yes,
discourse?
sure. Yeah. So he says a bhakta sees all as bhaktas everywhere outside. So bhakta is that's the path of devotion. So you're devoted to a guru or an object sometimes, or a teaching, even something subtle. That's a bhakta. A yogin sees all as yogins everywhere outside. So again, that is a path of duality, and that's where you do all these practices to control the mind or the body, but it's dualistic. Because there is me controlling the mind or the body, and my friend over there trying to control his mind and his body, and so on. So they're both dualistic paths, and they're kind of preliminary paths to the direct path. And then he says jnanin sees jnanins everywhere. So there's no inside and there's no outside in jnana. It's there is just one.
Beautiful. I also noticed that number 63 points to a similar theme. If
yeah, so what's going to be for next?
That's what I'm saying. But be where we are here now.
For next time.
Yeah. Any further elucidation? Check out 63. Yeah.
Yes.
Number 56 is an interesting one. I'm sure it's been of much debate.
It is, isn't it?
Over time.
In the Christian tradition, it's said it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. And Atmananda is saying that that's not right, or at least he's saying don't take it literally. You could actually also interpret it metaphorically as saying that someone who thinks they know everything is not going to find happiness. In other words, give up old beliefs and live in not knowing. That's another interpretation of the Christian quote. But, and most Christians will interpret it as sort of pretty literally. So here he's doing that, and he's talking about material possessions and money, and he's saying that having lots of it is not necessarily a bad idea, because it will show you that wealth and material possessions don't bring happiness. And I think that's a beautiful argument, isn't it?
Yes. And the very beginning says, if anyone at the height of worldly happiness or at the depth of desperation is able to direct his mind with one pointed attention to the right absolute, he may very well be said to have gone a long way towards the establishment of his own right center. And I love the way Atmananda brings in almost two extremes of seemingly opposite ways the world may be experienced by a human, and says, both are gateways to there's no obstacles to reality.
Yes, that last sentence is perfect, isn't it? For a spiritual aspirant, there can never be an obstacle. It's lovely. Yeah.
Exactly. And so if one, there is privilege in being able to, at noon in my time zone, and to be a part of this, this book study, but there's no obstacle to knowing truth.
Yeah.
Whether having wealth or not having wealth.
Yeah.
For one who's called to, there's no obstacle.
Yes. So 57 is interesting for me, because the first spiritual organization that I joined taught that women could never reach enlightenment. The best they could hope for was to be reborn as a man.
I love that. I
didn't actually stay there very long, I have to say.
I love this. Yes. Because of course, consciousness is genderless. It's bizarre
it is completely bizarre, and but an awful lot of the Hindu scriptures do imply that, and that's where the organization I belonged to had got it from. But he points out that the scriptures also contain stories of women who helped men recognize their true nature. And have you, Jenny, have you come across any of the stories of Chudala?
No, not yet.
Well, let me tell you one, because I think, and tell everyone one, because this story relates directly to Discourse 59, which we'll come on to in a minute, and it's so lovely. So Chudala was married to a king, and the king decided that he was going to renounce his kingdom and everything he had, and go out to the forest to meditate and do various spiritual practices.
Which refers to 56, thinking
yes,
I must renunciate. Yes.
Leaving Chudala, Queen Chudala, to as she became, to rule the kingdom. Now, Queen Chudala had a very good understanding of the spiritual teaching, and she also had special powers. So she was able to see telepathically that the king, when he went into the forest, he was just lounging about, lazy, sleeping, not doing a lot of meditation at all. So she appeared to him in his thoughts, and through her special powers, and told him that. And he got quite angry and denied it. And he said that to prove that he really had renounced everything, he was going to renounce his body by committing suicide. So he climbed up a tree and he was about to jump off when Chudala said to him, renouncing the body is still not real renunciation. Real renunciation is renouncing the belief to be a separate individual. And then the king suddenly realized his mistake and he climbed down from the tree and he asked Chudala to be his teacher. It's a lovely story, isn't it?
Yes, I love that. And in the name of course, we know increased awareness of the absolute, equality of gender. Atmananda in the back of volume 3, in his life sketch, he adored his wife, and spoke about how she attained realization of oneness through her devotion to her husband. And this little story in the back attests to the fact that anyone can come to an understanding of realization of the one self, no matter what their path is, whether a householder as Atmananda remained, or as his wife, who was clearly a devoted and loving wife. But phenomenal love is only an expression of the knowledge of oneness, and the goal of love is that oneness itself. And
yes, it's that love and devotion. If you take it far enough, then the object of devotion kind of disappears, and there's you only love itself. That's the real path of bhakti, is to only love itself. And it collapses in on itself. So she was no longer loving a person, loving a husband. She was loving love itself. There was no separation.
yes.
It's
And
beautiful.
It is beautiful. And really, for me to notice if something seems agitated at some kind of thought, what is the place of women in spirituality? Well, that points to a place I could spend some time with, a little self-inquiry. What is upset of a tradition that, it's harder for women than men?
Yeah, it's not harder for women. And that story of his wife could equally have been the other way around. It could equally have been his devotion to her that led him to an appreciation of his true nature. It's not that women have to be servants of and devoted to men. It's not like that at all.
Absolutely. If those concepts are offensive, then that's pointing to maybe have a look at that. What is it offending?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, we have some more stories with number 58. And I heard once upon a time, and I can't say what it was from, but certainly gospels, fables, stories like the one Jenny just told, they have an ability to bypass the mind that we're conscious of and supposedly go into the unconscious, and let's just call it work its magic. And so that's the reason why we're coming into a couple tales of Lord Krishna and say, oh,
yes, I mean,
you know, they can go through, they can just sink down.
They can, but I think the title is, I mean, we don't know the circumstances in which he talked about this, but he says that Lord Krishna's ways of raising his devotees to the highest truth were peculiar and exceptional. So he is suggesting that this should not be the norm. And I think we do have to be quite careful about this kind of story. Not the story of Chudala, I think that's absolutely fine. But these ones, Krishna is being quite manipulative. And in the modern teaching approach, in modern culture, that's not really going to work. And that can lead to all sorts of problems. I think we've seen with some of the famous cases of gurus becoming manipulative and devious, and problems with that. So it's not something that's done now. Let's say that. The stories, they're nice stories, but let's be a bit careful about them.
Yeah, right. And in the title of the discourse, Lord Krishna's ways were peculiar and exceptional. And he's meaning that, as you described, is very unique. So. Very unique. And at the bottom of that first paragraph, no other example of a teacher of Krishna's type is known in the past.
Yes.
So you're right. We have to watch the stories we tell.
I think so. Should we go on to renunciation, because that then connects with the story of Chudala, and have a look at what he says. So he
yes,
says, it fits very beautifully with what Chudala taught her husband. Renunciation or sannyasa is not likely to annihilate one's samskaras.
Wait, I'm sorry, Jenny. So we're going, given that these stories are not really worth telling over, although there are some conclusions within the discourse that kind of tells the bottom line that Krishna was trying to get at, we're going to go ahead and move to number 59. I think that would be sensible, rather than dwelling on the stories, which I feel that Atmananda himself was not, wasn't how. Certainly, he didn't teach that way himself. Let's put it that way. So I totally agree with you. I just wanted to make sure people knew where we were on the book, that we're on number 59 now. Yeah.
Yes. What is renunciation? So he says renunciation or sannyasa is not likely to annihilate one's samskaras even after the attainment of nirvikalpa samadhi in the yogic fashion. So we're back on yoga now, on control of the mind, and methods of meditation like mantra meditation, which is a method of controlling the mind and leads to nirvikalpa samadhi at the very highest level. He's saying that that's not going to annihilate one's samskaras.
Right, which is the conditioning, the past tendencies to just repeat the stuckness of flow of being.
Yes, the tendencies that revolve around the belief to be a separate entity. And he says the tendency for renunciation shows a diffidence or unwillingness or fear to look straight at the apparent world and analyze it to its very source. So the sannyasin sometimes chooses to get away from the apparently more dangerous parts of the world, relying upon his own mind and intellect, which are themselves parts of the world, and which he must ultimately renounce as being himself. And that really applied very much to the king. And he went out to the forest, and he wanted to escape all his responsibilities, and escape really looking at what he was.
Absolutely. And Atmananda says it next. Thus, as the field of his inquiry is incomplete, his renunciation is also incomplete. The result of such an inquiry can never be satisfying. The inquiry can be complete only when he is able to visualize the reality of his own self, even in the apparent variety. And this is pointing to the self-inquiry aspect of the direct path.
Yes.
You said it, Jenny. It's when, oh, I can't eat chocolate. I eat all the chocolate. And it's, oh, I won't ever eat chocolate again. You know, that's not looking at what's going on with the chocolate and me.
Yes,
And
yes, that's right.
The field of inquiry is incomplete. I'm not getting down to the root cause of what's going on.
And in fact, we don't need to give up anything other than our beliefs, and in particular the belief to be a separate entity. That's the only thing that needs to be renounced, nothing else.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Mm.
To achieve this, the visualization of reality of his own self, the sannyasin, even after attaining the nirvikalpa samadhi of the yogin, has to labor afresh on the path of direct knowledge. And I wanted to share a beautiful little book I found at a wonderful store, one of those wild bookstores that you see sometimes. It's Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse.
Oh, yes, lovely.
And it's an
yes.
easy read, but it ends up his long journey towards finding truth takes him back to where he started. The path of direct knowledge, and he meets the sannyasins along the way, and all kinds of different paths along the way.
Yes. Yes, I was very keen on Hermann Hesse when I was in my early 20s, and I read all of his books. Then it's beautiful.
Yes. Okay, Jenny, this is from Andrew. Can you please say something about Atmadarshan's verse on stages of illumination? There are paradoxes in the non-dual teaching. Andrew, do you want to come on?
I think that would be a good idea. Let's get Andrew on the.
It looks like it's chapter.
Do you want to unmute your mic, Andrew? And do you want to?
He's referring to chapter 4 in the Atmadarshan.
I don't know. I had surgery, so I'm not in good shape. But I had cataract surgery.
Oh, right.
Oh, you'll be so happy.
Well, you'll be in very good shape very soon.
Read the book, the verses. I can't read the Atmadarshan verse on stages of illumination.
I can read for you.
If you can
do you want to read them, Jenny? Yes,
sure.
That would be helpful, and then we can talk about what the issue is with those.
We're moving along.
There are a lot of paradoxes, and sometimes it's confusing, trying to understand.
Let Jenny read them, and then you can tell us about the paradoxes.
So number 4 in the Atmadarshan, different stages of illumination. He whose mind is captivated by the beauty of a figure sculpted in a piece of rock forgets even the fact of the rock being its background. When he rises above this captivation and looks at the figure, he sees the background, rock, which supports the figure. When the rock thus receives attention, rock is also seen in the figure, and later on, the figure is seen as nothing other than rock. Enlightenment of truth also comes in this manner. Consciousness becomes dimmed chiefly through one's captivation and abiding interest in external objects. When one outgrows this interest and looks at the objects, it will be found that they arise and abide in consciousness alone. When consciousness thus begins to receive due attention, it becomes revealed in the objects as well, and they themselves will, in due course, become transformed into consciousness. It is the realization of oneself and the entire world as one consciousness that is known as the realization of truth.
Right. So now tell us about the paradoxes, Andrew.
Yeah, so the teaching sometimes says, we are not objects, we are separate from the objects. And then it says that the objects can be transformed and into consciousness, and we are the same. The observer is the same as the observed. So it looks like it goes through stages. And first, it could be objects are separated from the observer. And then later on, it says the observer is the observed. And so it can be kind of difficult, going through. It looks like we have to go through those stages.
Well, yes, those are really potential stages, but they're really quite common, and that actually relates to Nirvikalpa Samadhi, which we were talking about. So usually the first step for most people coming to this teaching is the recognition, I am not this body, I am not this mind. So that's the sort of neti process. And it's actually pretty obvious that I'm not this body, because we have this inner feeling that what I am has always been the same. It doesn't change from one year to the next, and yet our body does change from one year to the next. Our mind changes even more from one moment to the next, let alone one year to the next. So we can't really imagine that we are our mind. That doesn't make a lot of sense at all. So it's pretty easy to see what I essentially am is not my body, not my mind. I don't know what I am, but I know it's not just my body or my mind. Then what we do is we sink, and this is a practice of meditation, which is really, in addition to self-inquiry, it's almost the end point of self-inquiry. It's sinking below the mind, sinking below all of our sensations, all of our perceptions, all of our thoughts, and we just sink into the silence of ourself, like sinking to the bottom of the ocean, and we rest there, and it's like falling asleep but still being awake, but without being aware of anything, being aware, but not being aware of anything. And once we've experienced that, it's not too difficult to see for ourselves, yes, that's what I am, because that's what's always with me. Now, that isn't the end of the story. That's just an intermediate stage. So we've taken 2 steps now. Our first step is to say, I'm not an object, I'm not a body or a mind. And so our second step is to go back and say, yes, I'm that which is there all the time. And that's what I call awareness or consciousness. And that's fine. In some ways, it's better not to give it a name. I'm that which is aware of my experience. So when you've reached that stage, the question then is, well, what is the world? What about all these objects that I see around me? And that this next stage is the much harder stage. And it tends to take an awful lot longer. And what this stage is about is seeing, not just seeing that there is intellectually, that there is only one reality, that there is only one consciousness, but actually feeling that there's no separation between myself and anything else, between myself and any objects that I see. I look at a table and, well, that all I know of that table is seeing that table or touching that table, and that's within, that experience is within myself. I am that which experiences that experience. So where does that experience take place? It takes place in me. It doesn't take place outside me. So is there really an outside of me? No, there isn't. And that's really what he's saying, because once you feel that there's not anything outside of you, if you are then pure consciousness, then everything is pure consciousness. So the rock is pure conscious, the sculpture is pure consciousness, or the sculpture is pure rock.
And the inside and the outside.
There's no separation. There's no inside and there's no outside. So that's really the steps. People, I think it's quite common to go through those steps, but I don't think it's absolutely essential. I think there are people have talked about a very sudden recognition where there's no steps involved. But I think for most of us, then we would go through those.
All right, thank you.
Does that make sense to you, Andrew? Now,
yeah. And just to add, Rupert Spira has a lovely kind of clarifying statement of his understanding of non-duality. Is that our essential nature of our being is happiness, and that being is shared with everyone and everything. So
yes, no, I don't like that one, Jenny, and I'll explain why. As soon as you use the word shared, it implies distinction. There's one being here and it's shared with something else. So I have a cake and I share it with you, and you've got one piece and I've got another piece. So I'm not so keen on that one for that reason. I think it's okay as a preliminary statement, but I think there's a deeper level to really feel, not just that we share our consciousness, but we are everything. We don't feel any boundary between ourselves and anything or anyone else.
Yes. As you were describing, there's the Advaita, the Advaita aspect, almost the first and second stage of illumination, but then it goes into the tantric aspect of the outward outpouring and realization of oneness with it. And I love how you describe it, and your being shines with it as felt experience. Is beyond the intellect and beyond the mind.
Yes, it's a feeling experience, and it does. It's important for that experience to be recognized within the mind, not just intellectually, but it kind of becomes your default understanding within the mind. But it also needs to be your default understanding within the body as well. That both of them are important, and exactly as you say, it's the body side of it which is the tantric aspect of it. Yeah.
But thank you, Andrew. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question, because it is. You're absolutely right. It requires quite a bit of contemplation. That one. It's a very beautiful, very poetic description, isn't it? It's lovely.
Which maybe is a nice segue into our last discourse.
Right. Well, exactly. Yes.
how best view the world?
Yes.
What, Jenny? I'll ask you. What is the fittest of all instruments?
Yes. Well, he says consciousness is the fittest of all your instruments. Well, really, it's the only instrument, isn't it? If you can call it an instrument, and well, I wouldn't call it an instrument. It's not really an instrument. It's an attribute of the one reality. It's the ultimate perceiver. It's that which really perceives the world. We think that the body perceives the world or the mind perceives the world. No, it's consciousness that really perceives the world. And since there's only one reality, then consciousness is that reality. And so what it perceives is made of itself.
Yes. You are the perpetual knower, and the known can never tempt the knower, which is yourself. See yourself as such, and the whole trouble disappears.
Yes, if you see yourself as the known, a body mind, then trouble, suffering arises. Then once you see yourself as the one unchanging, eternal knower, then trouble disappears. It's very simple, very clear. It sort of brings us right back to where we started in Discourse 51, doesn't it, in a way?
It does come back to that. And just to speak from my own experience, we do this all the time. This is directly experienced. It's not reserved for the few people in a monastery or a monk who's renounced a worldly life. That if reality is what is, any given moment, there's perceiving as the knower, and mind can do its thing and name and label an object, but true understanding is without words. And notice it in yourself just as, I get it.
Yes. Yeah.
And Francis Lucille does a lovely analogy with listening to a comedian And that's a fun way to directly experience this. Just watch a comedian, and you're listening to the comedian, and then the comedian stops when the joke is finished. There's no thought. You'll just start laughing.
Yes.
Something gets it beyond the mind, prior to thought. And so this is the householder's path. There's no special trick. We do this all the time. We just don't recognize it. Like he also the Jivan Mukta only has to know it.
Yes, exactly. There is one important point I just wanted to mention. I can't remember who said it. I think it was Mamatha said Krishna's intent is absolutely pure, as opposed to some of the modern gurus cannot compare. One of the things that Francis has said, which I found really important, was there is only one sage, that a sage is not a person. And we tend to revere ancient sages and we think they're perfect. But one of the things he said to me once was, all teachers make mistakes. That they all make mistakes. They all fall into ignorance. So Krishna from time to time would have fallen into ignorance, just as modern sages do. And I think it's really important to recognize that we don't take the words of any sage, living or dead, as being perfect. We take only what we understand, in the sense that you've been describing, Jenny, understanding beyond the mind.
And yet, are there mistakes, Jenny?
Yes, there are mistakes in the sense of falling into ignorance. That's not a mistake from the point of view of the universe, but from the point of view of what we perceive a sage to be, as someone who is permanently in wisdom, then we would naturally see that as a mistake, I think, from that point of view. Yeah. But yes,
in the bigger picture.
On the bigger picture, yes, certainly when I was talking to Francis about a particular situation, then what I also said to him was that, yes, I wouldn't have wanted it any other way. That mistake, which was an awful mistake and very upsetting for me at the time, but it led me away from that teacher, and that was really important. Yeah. So only one sage, and that sage ultimately is yourself, because there is only one self. So I think we're just about up to time now. And thank you so much, Jenny, for co-hosting with me. I thought initially I was going to be on my own, and thinking, my goodness, that's going to be quite something.
Gosh. Right.
Thank you all for joining us. As far as I know, Bill will be back next week with Verena Sophia, who I think may be a new co-host. I don't remember that name from before. So see you